Hello and welcome to this final preview video. This one's a little different. We're 4 acts in, and if you're a novice reader or an experienced reader and just haven't read Romeo and Juliet yet, or you're just reviewing, I think at this stage it's good to make predictions. If you're running a reading group or a class, I think it's good to sort of have these written out somewhere, make the predictions, talk about them, because it's less about whether you predict things correctly and it's more about thinking about the arc of where this story seems to be moving. And making predictions means you have to see patterns and see where patterns are leading us. I think that's just a good thing to do in general. So here's just some setup moments. Romeo finds out the key piece of information that we all know. He meets Balthazar, and Romeo asks, because he's banished, he asks the obvious question, how fares my Juliet? And then obviously Balthazar doesn't respond right away because he says, that I ask again, for nothing can be ill if she be well. Romeo clearly doesn't know he's in a Shakespearean tragedy. Balthazar says, then she is well, and nothing can be ill. Her body sleeps in Capulet's monument, and her immortal part with angels live. So her body's where all the Capulets are buried, and her soul is in heaven. And he says more specifically, I saw her laid low in her kindred's vault, and presently took post to tell it you. Pardon me for bringing these ill news, since you did leave it for my office, sir. He apologizes for needing to tell him this tragic news. Neither of them obviously know of the Friar Laurence's potion. Romeo, is it even so that I defy you, stars? Romeo, in the play itself, often blames fate and the stars. And that's kind of an interesting thing to think about maybe once we're done, is all the places where star-crossed, Juliet talking about when Romeo dies, cut him into little stars, and he'll make the face of heaven shine so that people will pay no attention to the garish sun. Stars exist sort of throughout this play in a really interesting way. Romeo continues, thou knowest my lodging. Get me ink and paper and hire post horses. I will hence tonight. Balthazar, I do beseech you, sir, have patience. Your looks are pale and wild, do import some misadventure. You should hear the Jaws theme if you have random characters looking at you and saying that things don't look good. And then Friar Laurence was attempting to communicate to Romeo in basically saying, look, I gave Juliet this potion. She's not really dead. And, because we're sort of in a tragedy, some of the tragic things that happen are based on chance. You can argue that the illiterate messenger from the Capulets, which led Romeo to the party, which led him meeting Juliet, was a sort of tragic moment by chance. And here, Friar Laurence says to Friar John, this same should be the voice of Friar John. Welcome from Mantua. What says Romeo? Or if his mind be writ, give me his letter. Friar John says, going to find a barefoot brother out, one of our order, the Franciscan, to associate me, here in this city visiting the sick, and finding him, the searchers of the town, suspecting that we both were in a house where the infectious pestilence did reign, sealed up the doors and would not let us forth, so that my speed to Mantua there was stayed. The message that was supposed to get to Romeo about Juliet not being dead doesn't get to Romeo because of the pestilence, because of the plague. And when there was plague, you would shut the gates, no one would be allowed in and out, you'd quarantine, right? And we're kind of familiar with what that means. So think about the character Paris. Not a bad character, boring, relative to Romeo and Juliet, but not evil. He's just following directions. What do you think is going to happen with Paris? He's supposed to marry Juliet. We know Juliet's not technically dead. What are the possibilities there? What's going to happen with Romeo and Juliet? Now, if you know how the play ends, fine. Or if you completely trust the prologue that they're going to commit suicide. A, do you trust the prologue? B, if you don't trust the prologue, that's interesting for a whole set of reasons. But if you trust the prologue, keep thinking, though, like what might be interesting about how they commit suicide? Are they going to commit suicide in the same exact fashion? Are they going to commit suicide together as conscious choices? Are they going to commit suicide separately? What are the possibilities? And then something that I just find fascinating, this is a Globe Theater production of Midsummer Night's Dream. The end, Peter Ackroyd teaches us in his Shakespeare biography called Shakespeare, the Biography, which I love the arrogance of that title. he teaches us that at the end of Shakespeare's plays, at the end of Elizabethan plays, there'd be a dance. Now, at the end of a comedy, which ends with usually marriage or some sort of romantic unification, a dance makes sense. There's wedding dances, you know. But imagine at the end of Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Coriolanus, King Lear, Macbeth, Othello, the great tragedies, bodies littering the ground, there'd be applause, a pause, characters would get up and dance. And yes, that's really weird and like really weirdly specific to this time period. When you go see a tragic movie now, there's no celebratory moments at the end. Peter Ackroyd argues that the reason for that is that all art, even tragic art, is cause for celebration. You know, you get to pause in your day and live these human experiences, even if they're tragic ones, that there's some reason to celebrate. We know, too, that some people went to the theater really just to see the dance, and they kind of tolerated the play to get to the dance at the end. But regardless, read the last couple of pages of the script. And the Montagues and the Capulets sort of promise some things of each other. And on one hand, it looks very positive and hopeful. And you can also read it that they're still doomed to hate each other and be violent towards each other. I guess one of my big questions is, you can ask this of any Shakespeare play, would the dancing at the end make sense? All the bodies standing up. In other words, do you find that there's hope at the end? Is there hope in Verona? Do you see peace and unity possible at the end? And that kind of depends on how you read the very end. So I hope these videos have helped, and good luck with your further reading.